EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at in this fine nation. And there's a few things we got to talk about today because it's just been last crazy 24 hours, that's for sure, in the world. We'll get into that a little bit. But first, I want to introduce John Scardena. John, welcome to the show.
Hello.
And today, well, in the Navy, there's this term, right? So we have a change of command. And as we go through the change of command, we hand over the control or the con of the ship or of the organization. And today, I am handing over the con, if you will, to John Scardena. EM Weekly has been going on for five years. This is the fifth year that we've doing it. Matter of fact, producer Brian and I started the show talked about the show in December over a cup of coffee, believe it or not, in December of 2016, I think. And then we got it up and rolling, and we launched April of 2017. And so I guess not quite 5 years, but we're right
coming up on 5 years.
Yeah. So it's been a great ride. And one of the things that I want to do is create a community for emergency managers, and I think we did this year. And then the other thing I wanted to do was to be able to create something and then at some point hand it off to someone else to be able to continue with and grow. And this is what we're doing here today with John and some of the stuff he's been doing. So, John,
hey,
the show
guys.
is yours.
Yeah, so this is how we're going to do it today because it's pretty fun. I've been on Todd's show, I think, once or twice. He's been on Disaster Tough podcast a couple times. And so because this is Todd's last episode, I thought it'd be fun to go through and kind of ask him some questions about some of the amazing things he's done over the last, several years. Obviously, he's had awesome guests on the show, really great people. And, as a great host himself, he's been able to pull or extract really great information out, great advice for the field of emergency management. So we just want to highlight that today and just kind of run down through the list. So it's kind of fun. I get to come on EM Weekly and flip the script a little bit, but I'll take that I'll take that ship. But before we start, just want to give you a heads up that if you do want to continue listening to this kind of content of emergency management and those styles of emergency management, make sure you check out Disaster Tough podcast so you can continue this, right? So we're continuing that ship. But let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about the last 24 hours real quick, not even the next, 24 years, but Ukraine and Russia, that's a thing. What is your take on that, Todd, before we get into your show, your history of your show?
Yeah, I think this is kind of important to talk about because, interesting enough, I was at the Nevada, it's going on today right now, actually, the Nevada Emergency Preparedness Association meeting, and the director of the state of Nevada's emergency management was talking about the fact that he has on his desktop a Ukraine file folder that he's putting information that he's getting about Ukraine, and the fact that as emergency managers, it is a global position, right? We have to take a look at what's leading or going around the world. Supply chains are affected. I mean, if you've tried to put gas in the last couple of days, you may have noticed that the prices are extremely high. California, they're predicting that the prices this summer, because we have this summer blend thing that we do here, it might be about $7 a gallon.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so that's going to impact. Now you might go, okay, sucks to live in California, right? Well, guess what else it impacts? It impacts all the gas that's going into the trucks and to the trains that are sending food from the Port of Los Angeles to the rest of the country. So we're probably going to see an increase in food prices here, which I think is going to put stress on the economy. And then we're going to see, for those that are on the margins now, man, it's going to be hard. So I think we're going to have to be thinking about food banks, food shelter or sheltering for people. This is going to impact us. This is not just the European war, right? This is something that's going to impact us across. So that's my take on it. On the personal side, I have a friend that's over there right now, and we're kind of keeping tabs on him. He's trying to get move away from the danger zone, if you will. to safety, and so he's been living there for a bit now, and hopefully we'll hear more from him. And his name's Aaron Siebert, the host of a show here that we do at Sitch Radio as well. And maybe Brian, we could bring Brian on a little bit later on to talk about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what's happening in Ukraine. I know you've interviewed Chris Kyle. I've interviewed Chris Kyle, somebody who works a lot with NATO, and I've had the opportunity to work with NATO as well. Overseas, they call, especially in Europe, they call emergency management crisis management, and it really shows that this idea. I wouldn't say stigma, but this idea that emergency management is for natural disasters is a fallacy, because as you're walking through talking about a war that's happening overseas and the economic impacts, the critical infrastructure impacts here, and how that will play out in the individual lives of people halfway around the world, it shows that emergency managers need to be cognitive of the incidents that are man-made incidents, the technological incidents that are happening in other places, whether intentional or unintentional. If they have impacts, we need to be aware of that. And so it's a great call out. But if we're gonna, you're gonna.
No, I was just looking. I was looking to see if he posted anything. So Kyle, looking to see real quick on LinkedIn. Yeah, he just posted something 15 hours ago regarding what's going on. He works with NATO. He's a great guy. Kyle, if you're listening, hopefully you're staying safe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's pull it over back to the EM Weekly side, because this is probably what everybody wants to talk about, or especially hear from you as the EM Weekly host for the last 5 years, roughly 5 years. Like we said, we had lots of great guests on here, great content. But in terms of looking back, what are some of the highlights for you as you've progressed over the last 5 years?
Well, that's a good question. As far as guests goes, I've had some really great guests on. Some of them probably were people who you wouldn't think would be like, oh, this person is not super famous, but really influential when it comes to emergency management. I think some of those guests were a lot of fun to talk to. I love talking to some of the up and coming emergency managers that were out there, and so that's really kind of where I was pleased. The cool thing is I had, oh my gosh, 4 or 5 past FEMA administrators on the show, and 1 current. Or no, two current, or 3.
Was Brock current when he was in?
Yeah, Brock was. So 3 current, and then so there are 3 current at the time, and then 5 total FEMA administrators on the show.
Cool.
That's kind of cool.
The people like, so I had the emergency manager Justin Pierce on the show from LAX, and he was talking about the access that podcasts provide people who want to have those conversations with influential leaders. And you've definitely had a lot of influential leaders, whether FEMA or otherwise. You noted some people that may not have had the notoriety, but they had figured it out. Yeah. One of the things that I really liked about your show is that you would do these books, right? You'd go through and you'd read like, 1.5 million books, and you'd say, hey, here are my book recommendations, and trying to get the field to keep learning, keep standing out. And so if you were in your last episode, you're like, I need you to read X, X, and X. Which book would you read?
Oh, wow. That's completely flipping the switch, or flipping the script. Oh, man. I have so many. The ones, like, you can see behind me. These are the ones that I have more than this, by the way. And I've given some away in the last year. I've gotten rid of some books. A couple books. One is it's kind of, this one you probably would never think of it, but there's a couple sales books that I think are interesting. And Jeffrey Gitomer, anything from him is really critical to read if you want to learn how to sell. And Dan Scott, who was yesterday at NEPA giving a presentation, I talked about the idea as we as emergency managers need to learn how to market ourselves. I think that's why if you can go into a room and really sell emergency management to your C-suite or to your to your jurisdiction, or to the mayor or city manager of your organization, right? I think it's critical to have those skills. So those books right there. As far as emergency management books go, right now there's a couple of books that are about the history of some of the storms and disasters that happened beforehand. So I'm reading about the Johnstown flood. I think that's one of the ones that I think is really interesting to read about, just about how this happened in the 1800s, and how it just kind of ripped through and this dam gave away, basically, and how it just impacted the community and changed really the shape of how things are done. And this is really when government started going, oh wait, we have to plan for these things, and we didn't call it emergency management back then, obviously, and that the Great Influenza. Crazy enough, we're living through the pandemic now, but I read the
my eyes
Great
started twitching a little bit when you brought up diseases.
The Great Influenza. The book was fantastic when it came to just the whole history of it, and I've read this book 3 or 4 times probably over the years, and it's funny. I actually read it again in the summer of 2019, so before this pandemic broke out, and I read it in preparation for another program that I was about to interview, the guy who was in charge of epidemiology for the United States military, and we wanted to talk about that because realistically, the Great Influenza impacted the way we fought a war. Impacted how battles were waged or not during World War One, complete with the French with the German and English on the French front, right? And so, it was that the impact of that flu was more than just a bunch of people that got sick and died, right? Which is terrible as itself, but just how it really shaped the world. And we're seeing how this oddly enough, this pandemic kind of mirrored that. Maybe we'll shape the way we fight this war. I don't know, but it was kind of interesting to see how it mirrored.
Well, I will say one thing. It's definitely easier 2 years later to tell people about emergency management. Before, it was like, I'm not a doomsday prepper. I'm here to help, here to mitigate. Now it's like when I talk to C-suite, they're like, okay, how do I get people back? I need my company to operate. You're like, thank you for needing me. I wish it didn't take this, but thank you for needing me. So it shows that, the impacts both globally and to our specific industry are, we can't really see the ripple effects, but we hope that the ripple effects, geared towards mitigation, geared towards disaster risk reduction, geared towards helping people understand the costs of disasters, whether they're, the disaster that's happening in Ukraine right now with Russia invading, or it's, a pandemic. Disasters have financial and human impacts, and we got to be aware of that as well, for sure. So great call out, great books to read. I'm a big fan of Social Vulnerability and Disaster. That taught me a lot about how, markets shift and change and how they impact people differently, especially as they're individually more resilient or tough. That was a nice little plug to those threats. So again, great call out. In terms of going back to that guest perspective a little bit, you mentioned the FEMA administrators. You mentioned some of these outliers that really taught you. What was like one of the two or three things that you're like, oh man, I need to internalize that as you were talking to them, that's made you a better emergency manager?
Well, a couple of things. It's so broad because it's just amazing of having, compare between EM Weekly, the EM Student, a couple other podcasts. I realized I was doing some math, and I've had over 500 and something interviews in the last, and so it's on the weekly. So if you think about it, it's not like every day, right? So, so a couple of impacts. I think it made me really more empathetic when I'm speaking to people, especially those that we've interviewed that were involved in as the victims, if you will, or survivors, of however you want to frame that, of disasters, and then especially some of the bigger ones, right? And just really, we have the ability to, or I said the ability. Sometimes we detach ourselves from the event, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we go, okay, we're working this, and it's a job, and I'm pushing numbers and doing things like this and getting this thing done. And at the end of the day, when we really take a look at this and the vulnerability that we really are trying to fix, right, isn't those that have of the means and the ability to leave, right? We really need to be thinking about those that don't have the ability to move when we ask them to, and really get into the why of our people staying behind, and it really kind of I chew on these things, and I'm an academic at the end of the day. I I take things to heart and I think about things a lot and I write, right? And and so after I do interviews with people and I really kind of chew on some of the questions and answers that we did during the process, and really kind of mull it over a little bit, I've grown as a person individually, not just as an emergency manager. I've got to meet some really great people out there, and really understand what it is outside of my bubble. All right, and here in Southern California, where the weather is beautiful most of the time, to really see what it is globally. Speaking to people that were over in Japan, speaking to people that were in the tsunami in Thailand, speaking to people that were going through war-torn countries like Kyle King, over in the Ukraine, we're putting it back together after
Mm-hmm.
it fell apart. Canada, Mexico, Chile. Trying to think of Australia, right? Of during the fires, New Zealand
Yeah.
after the earthquakes. Some of the people who were involved in responding to some of the shootings across the country. It's just to really to say, look, we are a small world, right?
Mm.
And I think globally now, and teaching now at the University of Research and Applied Development, a couple of my students that come on, to hear the perspective, like from Tony Fogarty, for instance, from the UK, and getting to hear his perspective on what's going on in the world. It's been that opportunity to really shrink what the globe really is for me, and to have this network. It's been great.
Yeah, I mean, and you're going to do great things because this is kind of a fun little bad segue, good segue, but you're moving on to other things too. And so you're getting a lot of love here in the comments of people who, obviously learned a lot, as they should have, well deserved. But if they want to keep up with you personally, where can they find you now? Where are you going to move on to?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I've got a couple projects in the pipeline, and one one of the so I'm actually going to leave from EM Weekly to kind of really expand what we're doing, and I had a show, and the Brian and I just put a placer for it called the Todd DeVoe Show, and we couldn't think of a great name for it, so it's going to be called the Todd DeVoe Show.
I like it. It's a good name. That's a good name.
So that's gonna kind of take this place of the Ian Weekly and the Lives on Thursdays. But we're putting a lot of time and effort into growing is the Emergency Management Network, which is really it's a blog more than anything else. It's on the Substack, and there I'm bringing in thought leaders, emergency management thought leaders, to write about emergency management. It's a newsletter that can go right into your inbox. We're trying not to overwhelm the inboxes, if you will. So we're going to be doing a weekly newsletter that comes out that highlights the things that are being written about on there. And we have some really great writers that are over there. Everybody's doing this of their own free will and time. It's not monetized in any way. You know what I mean by that? As far as there's some Substacks you can like pay for, this is not ever going to be that. So just kind of free newsletter that would love to have you guys just read about emergency management and really grow the profession. And that's at the end of the day is the goal here is really to grow the profession, and then highlight all those great thinkers that are out there that are really putting time and effort into making the profession of emergency management better. And if I can do anything in my life, and I try to with everybody I come in contact with, and in every organization, is it's never I never really want it to be about me. Even though it sounds like it is by the name of the show, I guess. But it's really about about really raising up other people around. So like, that Disaster Tough, I was happy to be part of that and seeing what we could do and making that a better, but I say better, larger program and larger reach. The Sitch Radio with Brian Colburn, really working with him, growing from that one single office that he created when he was kind of doing it as a part-time job in between his other job that he had. And our goal was, hey, Brian, let's get you out of that other job and get you to be able to have a studio. And then now he has this like massive studio in Irvine, which it's not massive. I should say it's good. It's a really good sized studio.
Bigger than one office, yeah.
It's more than one office. He has like 3 or 4 offices over there, and he has staff working for him now. And
awesome.
it's just great to see that growth. And then as the president of IAM Region 9, working with like Jorge Rodriguez, who is our chair for the symposium that's coming up in June. He's looking at giving those leadership opportunities for people, and Jackie Koji Tamayo, who she's leading, and Isamar Garcia and those young emergency managers that are coming up and taking leadership positions that hopefully someday they won't even know who the heck I am, and those people are going to be running the world, and that's the stuff that makes me excited and what drives me in the morning.
Well, it'll be hard to forget the name of your show that's coming up, because as I'm looking on the screen right here, I see Todd DeVoe. So if you want to follow up with the Todd DeVoe show, make sure you don't forget the name, the Todd DeVoe show. And I'm sure it's going to be excellent. I like the idea of expanding outside just emergency management, outside of those different areas. And I'm excited to hear not just like the history of you and what's happening to you, but yeah, Brian obviously is an amazing producer and he's done amazing things with you, and he's actually on the back end right now. And for the little I've been able to interact with him, 100% a pro, and it makes sense why Sitch Radio has done so well and why you guys have done so well in the last several years. And even with Dan Scott being on the show fairly frequently. Obviously, we all know Dan, and so just like everyone that's been a part of EM Weekly, it's been impressive what you've done over the last 5 years. I keep saying 5 years. We're going to call it 5 years. It's not like 4 months and whatever, how many months, but 4 years and how many months. But it is impressive, and people should take note of that. And hopefully here at Disaster Tough, we can kind of continue leading the helm on emergency and disaster management and thinking how we can innovate the field, how we can look at different aspects of emergency management, and really try to keep pushing that needle, as you noted, try to help the next generation of emergency management look at not just the federal government, but also look at county and rural emergency management, look at organizational emergency management and how each of those differ, and bringing on people that do that. And I'm sure with your blog and with the Todd DeVoe show that you'll be able to hit a lot of people. And I'm sure, you have quite a bit of guests. So, or followers, I'm sure they're going to jump over there, and they should. So I'm calling that out right now. They should follow the Todd DeVoe show. But as we wrap up here, again, it's been a pleasure working with you in this space, and to be able to flip the script a little bit here on your last episode and be able to interview you as we talk about the lessons learned, your own after action, if you will, and look at, your next steps and maybe lessons learned in that process. For the people who are listening to that show, again, one last plug for Todd DeVoe. Look, make sure you follow the Todd DeVoe show. But if you're looking for specific emergency and disaster management, as Todd noted, switching that ship, if you want to follow the Disaster Tough podcast, it's by emergency managers. I'm an emergency manager, obviously, and we interview emergency managers. We try to take field experts and bring them on and integrate their thought processes into the field. And of course, EM Weekly will continue to live on, not just in the hearts and minds. I feel like that should be said, but Todd has had a lot of great interviews. That's not going away. Make sure you go back and check out those, those previous episodes. Todd's still an educator. He's still going to be both in his own space and out in the world teaching, and it's kind of exciting to think about that. And, stay tuned. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But in terms of both of these shows, they're part of the Readiness Lab, so you can also check out the Readiness Lab that has other contents and other great shows, great webinars even. But I think it would be misplaced if I ended your show I feel like it's only right for you to end your show. One last sign off to your group. Again, you're getting tons of love in these comments. I'll let you say goodbye to your crowd, if you will.
Absolutely, John. Thank you so much for this, and thank you for this the time spent today. Just doing this flipping the script interview. It's always weird to be on this side of the, especially here with the Ian Weekly. Again, Ian Weekly has been a passion for me for many years, and I really do love it. And what I love most about this is the ability to meet everybody, going out to the conferences and running into people who are listeners, and that always blows my mind and to this day. It really does, and I think it's exciting. I'd like to bring producer Brian on, if he could pop on for a second. Hey Brian, I just want to thank you for your time and effort that you put into to the Ian Weekly Show and starting this thing from scratch, from nothing to where it is today. And I know you're doing great things with Sitch Radio, and it's been awesome. And thank you for your time and effort.
It's been an honor, Todd. I've learned a lot about you and emergency management from you and your guests, and it's been a quality show. So I appreciate being a part of it.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you all for listening and tuning in to Ian Weekly for the last almost 5 years. It hasn't been anything without you. So you guys are amazing. You guys are amazing listeners, and for the great ideas I've got throughout the years. Thank you all. And hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be just doing something a little bit different, and I think that you guys will enjoy the guests that we're going to be bringing in for the Todd DeVoe Show. Matter of fact, stay tuned, because we're going to go. I think we're going to go live right after this to do a little introduction. So, awesome. All right, thank you so much for your time, and it's been a pleasure. And as always, stay safe and stay hydrated.